Aloha, everybody. Okay, yeah. Well, if I could just have everyone's attention, we're going to start on time, or we're going to try. So we're just going to start with a quick video, then I'm going to ask Marlene to, and then we'll start the talking part. Please.
This is America in 1900. This is a car in 1900, and a phone, and a high school. This is America in 1950, and a car, and a phone, and a high school. This is today. A car, a phone, a high school. Whoa, back up. So cars are now this, and phones are now this, but high schools are still that? American high schools are based on the same model, and it's been over 100 years.
Wow, that's a long time.
But why? In 1900, it made sense for high schools to prepare students for that. But in 2017, shouldn't they be preparing students for this, and even this? So why are we still granting diplomas based on the time a student spends in a seat? Why are we still using the Carnegie unit, which was developed in 1906 and says the formula for learning is 4 years sitting at a desk multiplied by one subject taught at a time equals students ready for the future? All questions XQ the Super School Project asked America to help answer. There was a competition. Not that kind of competition, this kind. The kind where communities across the country come together to rethink high school. So every student, everywhere, can be prepared for the future. And that's big, like really big. Like the largest open call in history to redesign high school big. A year has passed. This is the hard work that went into it. 10,000 people across the country became school builders. And thanks to them, there will be brand new ways of teaching and learning. Starting with America's first 10 super schools. Schools that will let students learn by doing, that focus on the future and spark curiosity. Schools that build community, unleash potential, and solve real-world problems. Schools that will ask their students what they think and will actually listen to them. Students, like me.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that. My name is Matt Lorin. For those of you that don't know me, I am the president of XQ. I want to thank you for being here and tell you what a pleasure it is to be here. As you will soon discover over the next 5 minutes, public speaking is not my forte, but I will give it my best shot. I also want to thank ASU GSV and everyone in the room for the opportunity to speak to you today and all the choices that you have. I appreciate you coming to join us today. Going to keep my remarks as short as I can, one, because this is not my forte, and two, we have a lot to talk about with our school builders. I want to start with two quick cliches. Two quotes from Thomas Jefferson. I just want to bring you back to our organic documents, taking you back about 200 years. Thomas Jefferson said, "An enlightened citizenry is indispensable for the proper functioning of a republic. Self-government is not possible unless the citizens are educated sufficiently to enable them to exercise oversight. It is therefore imperative that the nation see to it that a suitable education is provided to all of its citizens." And his second quote, which will resonate with anyone who is the parent of an adolescent, a teacher or mentor of an adolescent, or was an adolescent once themselves, he said, "If the children are untaught, their ignorance and vices will in future life cost us much more dearly, in their consequences than it would have done in their correction by a good education." Now, it's been 200 years since Thomas Jefferson said those things, and it's been 100 years, as we discussed in the video, since we revisited as a country the purpose of high school. Over that same century, we have invented and reinvented so much and so many aspects of our society and culture. We've gone from the Model T to the Tesla, from the switchboard to the smartphone, yet high school, the very institution charged with the success of our students, has remained frozen in time. Now, we've revisited and evolved aspects of almost every other public system, except for this one. And remember, America literally invented public high school. So we do know how to do this. And it has played an indispensable role not only in the success of our economy and our country, but globally as well. And we simply believe that it's time to do it again. Now here's some stark realities. Nearly 70% of American high school students feel that the classroom experience isn't relevant to their daily lives. Even more admit to, quote, mentally checking out during the school day. 1 in 6 of our students drops out of high school. Nearly 1 in 4 of our Black and Latino students. Our poor students, including our poor rural students, are twice as likely to drop out as our urban students. And though most of our high school students enter college, fewer than half are adequately prepared, giving America the highest college dropout rate in the developed world. It was from these realities, these convictions, and our commitment that XQ, the Super School Project, was born. We believe that it will take a movement to provide a high-quality education for every child, an education that enables a meaningful career, inspired democratic participation, and sparks a lifetime of learning. Now, XQ began as an open call, as we saw, to educators and entrepreneurs, to parents and pioneers, to business leaders and artists, researchers, and students themselves. We invited people to rethink the American high school and to explore new models of the school day, days with no start and no end, with 24-hour on-call tutoring. We asked them to rethink the school facility, a barge on the Mississippi, a Michigan public high school, and even the nature of curriculum itself, solving real problems in local communities. And we are rewarding great ideas and empowering communities to take bold steps. In just a few months, now, 19 months, tens of thousands of folks responded to our open call. We had representatives from every state in the country. We had over 60 occupations banding together to confront this challenge. And it has been truly inspiring. Sure enough, we've seen a kind of self-assembly and informed enlightenment among our communities, a hunger. And while political power is devolving from the center back down to the state and local levels, we are witnessing communities around the country rising up to become their own heroes. Several breakthroughs are giving rise to this XQ moment. First, brain science is yielding practical insights about how to accelerate learning. Growth mindsets are improving outcomes and students' sense of their own efficacy. And the science of neuroplasticity is proving that all students can learn. Data analytics and personalization technologies are meeting students where they are and taking them further than we ever thought possible. With the support of digital tools, teachers in classrooms are attempting more ambitious pedagogy and connecting with smaller groups of students in much more human ways. Communities are raising their hands to become more active participants in teaching and learning. Each school we support is more open and transparent in ways that invite the whole community to improve. And there are new arrangements of people and space and time that can make our schools more effective and make students and teachers feel more supported. Now, the school builders of the XQ movement seek to transcend the old measures of adequacy. Now, sure, we still need to excel at the 3 R's, but those are now the foundation for a more expansive range of capacities. XQ seeks to develop students who are masters of fundamental literacies, critical readers, compelling writers, mathematical thinkers, holders of foundational knowledge, informed about our world, our history, our culture, and our sciences, original thinkers, problem solvers, able to confront complexity and ambiguity with creativity and with logic. Generous collaborators who seek out diversity, integrate different perspectives and thinking, and are able to co-create solutions. And finally, lifelong learners, perpetually curious, self-driven, and self-directed. We are here today to explore how technology can help us rethink high school, to expand learning opportunities out of the classroom, in and out of the classroom, and foster collaboration and give teachers a holistic view of how their students are becoming masters of fundamental literacies. Whether it's installing immersive VR experiences in the classroom, Using technology to better visualize and track student achievement, technology is helping educators across the country individualize learning and track progress. The journey to create super schools is to develop students who are deeply engaged in their own learning and fully prepared for all that the future has to offer. It will be a long but worthwhile journey, and we need you to all be part of it. Every person in this room has a role in rethinking high school. Whether you are an educator, an investor, a business leader, creating new learning opportunities for our kids means working together to think outside the box. We hope you will join us by asking yourself what role you can play in this movement to rethink high school, and how we can leverage technology together in service of our country's future leaders. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Monica Martinez, a colleague and a friend who is XQ Institute's Senior School Support Strategist, as well as some of the amazing innovators we are working with from Washington Leadership Academy, Brooklyn Lab, and Iowa Big. Monica, can you join me?
All right. Okay. Thank you, Matt, and we can give him an extra round of applause because he got over his fear of speaking, right? So for those of you, there's at least 4 or 5 seats up here that just opened up, so be brave and bold because we're not giving off the stage until they kick us out, and you guys do too. You guys heard Matt introduce the panelists that we have today, and it's my honor that my job is truly to support the 10 super schools every day. We have 10 super schools, and the whole idea of the competition was to catalyze a movement to really democratize and get people interested in rethinking high school. And it's actually an honor that we're here with so many other innovators and thinkers. You know, many of us went to the session on out-of-the-box thinking. We went to the session on global problem solving and challenge-based learning. And we feel that we're in a very great community being here at the conference today, and just so happy that the super schools and our other awardees could come. I just want to give a real shout out because it would just be a disservice to me not to be able to have the other super schools just kind of stand for a little bit and just let me just like at least introduce that we have 7 other schools here that aren't on stage with us. And if you guys can just stand for 1 second. All right, and so it's kind of filled up the front row. And they really represent everything that Matt described about the range of innovation they're trying. So for today, without me going into introducing each of the folks here, because you have their bio, I think most of them are smarter than me and they knew how to put their speaker bio on the app, which I did not. So you guys can always go to the speaker app and look at their bio. I just kind of really want to get into the question and answer time. So I haven't really met Shawn before. Shawn is one of the XQ awardees in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And we just thought what they were doing so innovative, we wanted to be able to give them some funding, and they received $1 million. And Shawn's going to tell you a little bit more through our questions and answers. And so Shawn's not used to me asking this question, but WLA and Brooklyn Lab is used to me asking this question, but they have to say it in 2 minutes. And the question is, if you had to tell this audience what your innovation is, what is your innovation?
Our innovation at Iowa Big, which I should say is not connected with big picture.
That's true.
That's confusing for a lot of people. Our innovation is that we are vicious about our community partnerships. We are attached to them in a way that in some ways is almost pathological. When a student comes to me with a beautiful idea, something they really want to build, the first question is, where's the partner, where's the connection, who is this serving? How can we make that happen? What kind of funding do you need? What kind of partner do we need to connect you with? We have staff that's literally their entire job. They don't come in knowing what to do. They come in waiting for a student to have an idea or waiting for a community partner, whether that's a nonprofit, government agency, a traditional company. They send those ideas to us, and we look for that connection between the interest of the students and the community.
Okay. Eric, tell us about your innovation or what compelled you to apply to the XQ competition.
So Brooklyn Laboratory Charter Schools is a small network of free, public, unscreened schools in downtown Brooklyn. We serve today, we serve about 700 middle schoolers and will grow to serve another 850 high school students. So we start 9th grade this fall. I'd say we exist to serve complex learners. So particularly young people that school today doesn't work well for, and how we kind of format the school day or the relationship with educators or the degree to which school is formatted as interest or passion driven, has not yet built a strong bridge between the scholars we serve and the school community. So we have a deep belief that the world is changing in fundamental ways, and that high school needs to catch up, but that it matters to have educators and families and young people from the most diverse zip codes on the planet at the design table, rolling up their sleeves and participating in the redesign of how we do high school in this country. Brooklyn Lab kind of does that with a focus on positive youth development, on personalization, on mastery of college-ready and life-ready rigor, and on an emphasis on kind of creating or designing signature experiences that are the types of experiences that young people will remember 20 or 30 years from now.
Right. And so Eric is the founding principal of Brooklyn Lab Charter, and it's a middle school right now, 6th through 8th, and they are now in the process of designing their high school, which will open this fall. Yep. And our next two panelists is Stacy Kane and Duane Rollins. And we asked Duane to come because he's from the business community and he's on their board. And he's very involved in really thinking about their emerging technologies, but he's there at the school all the time, which is amazing and wonderful. And he is one of the founders, and Stacy is the CEO. And then Joey, I know I saw you, the principal. Raise your hand, you're in the very back. So we have three representatives from here. So Stacy and Duane, I'll have you guys divide the question on what is your innovation or what compelled you to apply to the Super School competition.
Sure, yeah. So Washington Leadership Academy just opened in August for the first time for our first class of 9th graders. They come from 32 different middle schools across Washington, D.C. They came in at a 1st through 10th grade level on the MAP test, all in one 9th grade class. They're 99% students of color and 85% free and reduced price lunch. But from a more asset-based note, 100% of our kids have personal power that is exponential, and they are ready to be change agents and makers in the world. The biggest unique features of our school are, number one, tech creation. So we don't just use tech in our classes, which we do. All of our students have Chromebooks and do personalized learning. But our kids actually create technology. So all of our kids take computer science and coding. All of them are going to take AP Computer Science principles next year. That's going to double the number of girls taking computer science in DC and triple the number of kids of color taking AP Computer Science in DC. So we're excited about that. A few of our kids have actually already developed in virtual reality themselves. One of our students just launched his own virtual reality development company, so he would be happy that I was plugging his company now to you. We also do a lot of relevant real-world projects. So our students do interdisciplinary projects where they create real-world products that you would actually have to create. One-pagers, websites, PowerPoint presentations, and then they provide those to authentic audiences. And then finally, an innovation we have is power. Giving and seeding our kids power from adults to kids. So this is ingrained in everything we do, from our kids interview potential staff members. Our kids rate our classes at the end of the class on a Google form that goes to their teachers and to administrators to see how that class is doing, and so that those teachers can actually tweak it for the next class. So baked into everything we do is trying to give our kids as much power and voice as we possibly can, and that makes our school exponentially better from the beginning, because the potential that these kids have that has been untapped is massive.
And XQ was particularly special for us because it was an opportunity for us to think about how might we create 21st century technologists, right? There's been a lot of talk about coding and teaching kids to code, and we take that to the next level. We want you to have skills of coding, but we also want you to understand how you can impact your community. Because it's not just about having those skills, it's what you do with those skills. And we want our students to be creators and not just consumers of technology. So with XQ was an opportunity to really dive deeper and see how we can bring that to life. A lot of the things that we do are some of the innovations that have been happening over the last 20, 30 years or so in education. There just hasn't been a great way to implement it in schools. Right? So we're taking some of the best thinkings that we've seen from a number of schools around the nation and trying to impart that technology aspect with our students, so that way they can be those 21st century technologists that we need.
Great, thank you. As you can see, all of our panelists share the same passion, and all of our 10 super schools are using technology very similarly and also very differently. So for the purpose of this session, we actually created specific questions for each of the panelists based on the strengths of each of the schools, but it in no way diminishes the other things that they do. So my first question is actually for Eric with Charter Lab, with Brooklyn Charter Lab High School, and it really is focuses on Eric's passion and commitment to diverse learners and complex learners. And so the question is really, how has technology enabled your teachers to support your students' academic development?
Yeah. So a lot of times when, at conferences like this, when we think about technology, we think about designed learning experiences that we're trying to match students with on a Chromebook or match students with in a way that's kind of tailored to that student and serves that student's need. We probably start with a different kind of frame. And our frame is talent focused and is also kind of data structure focused. So from a talent perspective, we believe deeply in the need for kind of diverse educators to come together in an educational orchestra. So if you think about an orchestra, percussion and strings and woodwinds and brass are each kind of playing in different positions, and they need to be excellent at the specialized thing that they do, but they also need to play in a way that's coordinated and allows their strengths as educators to be amplified by the broader set of educators working at the school. We believe that in kind of public education, the kind of the structure of data or the way that educators share information or evidence of learning with each other, and the way that educators are able to empower young people to own the generation or the creation of evidence of their own learning. For example, of their increasing effectiveness as a college-ready writer, or their increasing effectiveness as somebody who can code in a way that the world values, right? That kind of mastery-based approach, or an approach where there's lots of different things that learning mean, and young people in a kind of interest and passion-driven way need to be involved in the process of creating evidence that they're increasingly effective at the thing they love, is central to kind of what we're trying to accomplish with technology. And so we, my co-founder, Erin Moat, my co-founder and wife, Erin Moat, is the architect of Cortex, which is a next generation learning platform. And kind of more than anything, that tool allows the range of personalized learning courseware and platforms, ways that we might generate formative or interim insight about how the young people we serve are growing. Cortex is a kind of integrator or a next generation learning platform that pulls data from a range of sources and allows our educators and our families and our scholars to visualize the evidence of learning in a way that's actionable, and a way that ultimately reflects our commitment, as I spoke earlier, to personalization, or to allowing young people to recuperate and accelerate their learning in ways that reflect what their strengths and their kind of needs are, but also positive youth development, or kind of this insight that young people have strengths that will equip them to compose a meaningful adult life, and that the role of schools is to make sure that we're providing signature learning experiences, or experiences that allow young people to kind of become increasingly clear about how they're going to navigate that transition to adulthood.
Great, thank you, Eric. And we'll talk a little bit in follow-up questions about the capacity of teachers and how they develop teachers to use that system and then to support the students and provide them with the scaffolds. So my next question is going to go to Shawn. So Iowa Big, you probably have to give a little context before you explain how you guys are using technology for teachers and students and your partners to innovate.
Sure. So Iowa Big is a program where we don't have any classes, we don't give letter grades, we don't have bells, all the stuff I'm sure you've heard 1,000 times today in some way or another, right? We don't do any of that. We started with a blank slate and said, what would you create if you treated students like humans? And Like people, yeah. And so we started from that very basic premise, which sounds almost ridiculous. And then a lot of you are going to groan because then we decided to write our own software, which is always really not a good idea, unless it's a really great idea. And the reason I would say you would groan about that, because I'm the one who has to manage it, and that's what I do is complain about having to manage it, is that it actually is a representation of all the experiments we're trying to do with students. So when a student says, look, I want to know how I'm leading my team. So our entire school is built by student efficacy and student affinity teams. And all these projects are coming from the students and from the community. I mean, our project pool has 300 projects in it, and we only have enough students to pick up 80 of them. And these are all real, legit, amazing projects in our area. And when a student says to me, I don't know if I'm leading my team very well, and I said, well, what do you want me to keep track of for you? Like, what do you want to know about how you're doing that? We've had these leadership seminars that we ran. We have these resources. We have these people in the community who have volunteered to teach this sort of this kind of content, and we actually literally build that into our software. And then and a part of her database record not only goes in this data about how she's chosen to create generative team members, or how she's chosen to show up with an agenda. I mean, she's 15. Don't laugh. That's a legit to show up with an agenda that actually is actionable for another bunch of 15-year-olds is it's a thing I still screw up for our staff meetings on Friday morning. So to be able to have that in her record, not just what standards she's done. We track those standards in a kind of a binary way using the NGSS and the Common Core. And as a team of teachers, we sit together and tell the story of a student every Friday morning. And as we tell that story, all 5 of us sit around and say, Elizabeth, she's amazing. Here's why she's amazing. We record that and we send it to their parents. So they get this audio file of us just bragging about their kid. But as we're doing it, we're clicking standard 5, standard 3, attempted, validated, yes, yes, yes. And by the end of it, everyone's bawling, well, if she graduates, can we keep her? And it feels like you're graduating your quarterback. And so the idea that we would build this software while we lay the tracks has actually become a part of our identity. We always thought, oh, well, eventually we'll sell this thing, we'll make a product out of it. No, that'll never happen. It's too horrible. I don't even show it to you. But the building of it is a part of our school culture now. And so feature requests have become a thing that we all do. And we lovingly call it Project Barbecue, which is completely ridiculous, but.
Give us an example of a feature request.
A student once, I was just talking, a student once asked to house the students, right? And I know you guys nailed that. But they wanted to put the kids in houses so they could schedule meetings where people could come and brag about their projects, because the kids said, look, we all work on all these projects, and as soon as we separate into our affinity teams, we actually don't see the other 135 kids. I see the same 20 who all like urban ag, or who all are attracted to Stratcom, right? I want to group into houses by nerd book culture or whatever. I'm the head of the Starfleet house. And the English teacher's the head of the Camembert cheese-making house. And a student requested that feature, and now they sort themselves by it. But that feature request actually goes into her record. Not only did she meet English standards, but she requested a community building feature in a piece of software. That's a bizarre thing for a kiddo to have.
That's true, yeah. That's a great example, and that's what I wanted him to show, is just that co-constructive nature where student agency and student-centeredness is always just at the forefront of this. So I'm going to turn over to Washington Leadership Academy and start with Stacy. And you heard Stacy talk a lot about her students and the diverse, high number of schools. They come from 31 middle schools, and the assets-based approach that they take with their students, and how they're really trying to change kind of the field of computing and STEM fields and who goes into that. So Stacy, talk a little bit about how you're using technology to help your students with all the multiple goals you guys have set.
Yeah, well, we went into it thinking, our hypothesis was that if we taught students to code, they might be able to code alongside college and make some extra money while they were in college. And 10% of our kids already have clients, and this is in month 8 of our school in 9th grade. So we're a little afraid of what's going to happen over the next 4 years, if that's the trend. But it just goes to show that this is a skill that's totally teachable. Kids can pick it up, and it's immediately employable. It's immediately valuable in the current market. And it's a white-collar skill. It's a high-level skill that kids feel really, really proud of. And then on the other end, the things that they're able to develop more than we can is just mind-blowing. One of our kids that I was saying started the virtual reality company taught the last lesson in the advanced coding course because he found YouTube lessons himself and then taught himself how to do it, told the teacher said, I don't know how to teach that, and so Jerome taught that class. So I think the possibilities in tech are really, really big. I mean, I'm very bullish on it. I would almost call it a silver bullet for some of our kids because the power and possibilities that it opens up for them is just really, really large. And we think that it's going to put them a level above their even private school peers that are graduating, because when they're going into college, they're going to have this huge portfolio of all these things that they've created that other people don't have. They're already getting unsolicited internship offers because of these skills that they have, not because the people are being nice, because the people really want them to come and code for them. So I think the possibilities here are really, really big and untapped. And education really needs to catch up to the rest of industry in this tech area and keep doing some big explosive innovations here.
I think two interesting things, Stacy, if I remember right, the students have learned to code so well they've started to like hack your own system, right?
Yes.
So sometimes watch what you wish for, right? And then I
Yes.
think the other thing I would add is just kind of going back to high expectations and how you support your students is a lot of the students who come into WLA are multiple grade levels behind. And it's the motivation and the engagement and the type of care that's happening in the school mixed with the technology piece that's really bringing the students engaged into this and then seeing how it empowers them for change. So, but I think the best story is the hacking your own system.
Yeah, that's a good story for you probably, not so much for me.
I'm sure it's a yeah, I'm sure it's a nightmare for most everybody. That's right. Aaron's like, stop. All right, so Duane, bring us the business perspective a little bit about how we need to be thinking about and bringing in the most emerging technology into our schools. So if some of you were at the lunch meeting, you know, there was a quote, you know, the world is changing faster than what our schools can keep up with. And this was really part of the vision that WLA brought forward in their application was we shouldn't have to wait 10 years when it's no longer an emerging technology, it's an old technology, right? So Duane actually works, you might share a little bit about what you do, the day-to-day, your day job, besides always supporting WLA, and then talk about your perspective of why you feel emerging technology is so important within our schools.
Okay, great. So one thing I'll say is that we're trying to prepare students for an uncertain future. Not because the future hasn't been thought of, but we have no idea how the innovations of today will be used in the future. And what we have also noticed is that the people who are leading these charges started very young and getting exposed to that particular technology. So one of the things that we want to do at WLA is expose our students to these emerging technologies earlier and also see what type of innovations that they come up with that we haven't even thought of yet. So we're excited about the new stuff in virtual reality and augmented reality, mixed reality, as we talked about there. But there's also a whole nother world when it comes to artificial intelligence and how we're going to process all this data that we're getting. Data is everywhere now, and big data is a thing, and how do you take that data and make it meaningful or make meaningful decisions around it? Autonomous vehicles is also huge. It's something that we're looking at in general, and the thing that really blew my mind is the notion of brain-machine interfaces. And that in itself is just so far out there that I'm just like, I have no idea what it is. But we can start teaching some of the fundamentals of it today, right? Yep. Along with teaching them how to ethically do those things. So yes, we have the challenge of dealing with students who can hack, right? But we also have the responsibility to teach them to be ethical hackers. And what does that mean? Right? Yeah. And that's a big part of what we're trying to do around our program. And as far as background, I have a user experience background, deep knowledge in that, but currently I'm the National Director of Product and Impact at SeedSpot, and we're an accelerated focus on social entrepreneurship. And that's really important too, to teach entrepreneurial education in school. So they're not just thinking about how to solve problems, but they're also looking for opportunities, right, within those problems that can support their futures and make life a lot better for the communities around them. In addition to that, I'm the co-founder of STEMly, and we're a nonprofit that advocates for high quality STEM education. And the reason for that was that we realized that in industry it's hard to find technologists. Particularly those that are qualified that can come in and do things that are meaningful. So we partner with WLA to really work with them to try to develop more technologists that could, day one, come in and actually make a difference.
That's great. Yeah, I like that, starting young. So you actually, I'm going to stick with you, Duane, since you hit on the whole idea of digital citizenry.
Yeah.
So how do you actually develop and support that in your schools? And that's a question for all of you, is how do you develop that digital responsibility? How do you help your students understand that they no longer have to be passive consumers, but they can be prosumers, they can be creators, they can be producers. So talk a little bit about those other type of dispositions and skills that you're developing when you're also bringing technology into the school. So I'll lead with you, Duane, and then whoever wants to go after Duane.
Sure. And this is important because community used to just mean, the blocks that you lived on, the physical space. But community in today's way of thinking is really that community physically, but your digital community also, and how you can connect with people online across the world who have similar passions and ideas from you, but different cultural experiences day to day. So we want to expose our students, right, to both of those types of communities to work on the ground in their physical communities and changing that, where we have like internships that they'll be doing in their third year, but also in the digital world, right? How can you be a responsible digital citizen, right? And what does that mean? And how do you interact with people, and what are some of the norms that are there that are different from what you find like day to day?
Stacy, do you want to add anything more for WLA? Eric?
Yeah, so it seems like probably an odd answer, but I think data standards and interoperability matter a lot for how we can successfully, as a field, operationalize functionally like broader and deeper measures of learning, or how we can still value how are we doing as educators that care a lot about writing, care a lot about being able to read stuff that's high quality or that's very complex, while also caring about spending the hours we have together with scholars, cultivating young people who are generous collaborators on challenging problems, who are kind of creative thinkers for an uncertain world, who have some of the XQ learner objectives that provided a lot of the beacon for how the kind of open call for reinventing high school worked. It was oriented not just around a kind of RFP process, but significantly around kind of what are the ways that we privilege a set of learning goals that we know matter to what kind of adult life will our scholars have, but we haven't done a great job as educators designing schools that both get young people ready for the SAT or to get a 4 or a 5 on an advanced placement course, but also equip young people with the tools to to change the world or to build projects and teams and organizations that they're proud of. And so to kind of talk about it technically, every learning experience at Brooklyn Lab is tagged both to an academic objective, so say a Common Core writing to argue standard, but also to another 2 competencies that are specific to a student. So you could have 3 to 5 students working on the same applied research project that was culminating in the same environmental justice presentation in front of a community board. But Stacy, who's very organized, might be being tagged for writing to argue, plus how is she doing leading a team and helping other people get organized. Whereas I'm a little bit more mature and competitive, and it's important that my team activity be tagged to things like, am I really listening and being generous in how I listen to my teammates, and am I doing a good job of managing myself and holding myself accountable to a project that might span a couple months. And so unless we are talking about the structure of data, then we're always going to be, and how data is kind of shared across systems, then we're always going to be in a world where we have a narrow and kind of reductionist vision of what kind of learning matters. And if we're going to get beyond just kind of math and reading, we need to take kind of how we think about evidence of learning seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very similar to actually what Shawn's saying too, is then there's that opportunity for self-agency to see where they are, where they aren't. One time, I think a school that I met one time, they said, what a learning management system can do or technology can do, it's like the informal handshake with reflection and transparency for students, right? So they're not waiting to find out where they are, but instead they constantly see where they are. And just to kind of back up for a second, because that's where your teachers go too. So let's say that Monica's not doing so well in some areas. Then how do the teachers know how to support and intervene with my strengths and my challenges?
Yeah. So, first I'll answer the kind of question theoretically, and then from a kind of practical, how does the system work? Theoretically, we think that there's kind of two different directions that personalized learning could go. One is that more learning becomes digital, and you have players like Amazon or Netflix or Google providing a lot of content, but that ultimately people who are already good at school get a lot better and kind of accelerate more and get better more quickly, and people who already struggle to find a place and a sense of themselves in relationship to how we do school end up finding themselves falling further and further behind. And that's one potential future. At Brooklyn Lab, we're committed to a future that young people become increasingly effective at managing themselves as learners, so the kind of executive function piece. And we're also committed to young people being able to advocate for themselves as learners, whether it's kind of a peer kind of IEP, what accommodations do I need, or whether it's a sense of this is a kind of team or project or learning accommodation that's going to make a difference for me. So because we're trying to optimize for executive functioning and for self-advocacy, we ultimately have a set of features in Cortex that, things, for example, like an agenda page and a goal-setting page that as I sit with other students, like a kind of running partner, or as I sit with a coach, or somebody who's external to the school who's trying to set me up for success on a particular project, that I'm able to have kind of evidence-based and actionable conversations around whether my assignment was already turned in, whether I'm doing the research today that's going to culminate in the kind of oral defense in front of a real-world audience in 3 to 5 weeks, and ultimately whether I'm managing my time and managing my effort against the kind of broad and kind of deep measures for learning that increasingly simulate adult life. Because one of the challenges with focusing really narrowly on, let's say, a state exam that allows you to get a diploma at the end of high school, is there ends up being such a gulf between what grade 12 looks like and what grade 13 or adult life looks like, that we kind of falter, as we make that transition.
Great. No, I really appreciate that perspective. So, Shawn, tell us a little bit more about your platform by maybe using an example of a project that maybe a business person or community person, teacher, and student work on, and how they're able to access that platform for either the purpose of productivity, creativity, any similar work like that.
Sure. So we take the concept of co-creation really seriously, and I'm not saying that other people don't. What I'm saying is that it's really easy as a teacher to say you do that and then disrespect it when you start to get the jitters about algebra, And I'm a math and science teacher, so the stress related to algebra 2 is a real thing for me. Yeah. And I was working with a company in town, and they do electrical equipment distribution of all the partners to work with, right? That's the best. It's the one you want. Is the one that literally puts stuff on trucks and gets it to job sites. But it is, because the people in that company get it. They say, look, it doesn't matter that we distribute electrical stuff. It's about culture. And the culture of our company is something that we want students trained in. It's a culture of people first. It's all those things that you almost can cynically look at on the side of a truck on the highway, right? But like, this place believes it. And I was like, I don't even know if I believe that. Like, what do you mean? And so through our software, we, like he was talking about, I assume it's some sort of like tagging system where you're going to read this, we're going to work through this, you have this goal. On Monday, we're going to meet with the VP of distribution, and he wants to know, they were working on a project where they were putting GPS trackers on the employees who were pickers, right? So imagine like an Amazon distribution place, but it's all like light switches. And they're going to track these employees, and the students are up on like a command center, right? Like watching the employees move around a Marauder map, and the like Harry Potter stuff just goes deep. And this, so like, they're watching these people and they're like taking the data, and then the students realize that like they're taking data like once every 10 milliseconds on these people's location. And then like you could just see the one kid do the math on like how much data that's going to be. And he's like, he just bleaches, right? He's like, I don't even know, like, what are we gonna do, like, with terabytes of latitude and longitudes? And the girl sitting next to him was like, how big's a terabyte? Like, can Excel do that? And so the VP of distribution is there, and he's just in our system, and he's writing in like, look, I think we need to talk about how we're going to scrub this data, and like there needs to be a seminar with one of our IT people, and he pushes that to me, and I say, yeah, that's something we need to do. And so I think that's just a quick, cute story of like how that kind of happens in like a magical way. But that's because our partner like loves us. Like we've spent a serious amount of human teacher time on that partner. And it's weird to almost think of your community as your students too, because they forget that the high school is a part of their job too, right? That it's a public, we literally are called the Cedar Rapids Community School District, except like the community never wants to walk into the building. So you have to like do a lot of work to get them to believe that they're educators too, and that you'll always be the safety net in case something is shenanigans or not real. The hardest thing about that though, and there's a pitfall here, because this all sounds great, but tagging all that stuff like was stressing my staff out. They were like, I'm not doing that anymore. Like I asked them to like write about, whenever a kid learns something, write about it and tag it and hit go. Yeah, how'd that go? It didn't, right? And so one of the students had this great idea. He's like, why don't we build a machine learning, train a machine learning package to look at this stuff that we all are dumping in all day, all the time as our evidence. Yep. Like just sort of almost like live blogging our day, right, with standards. And so I've been working with a couple of kids in a language called TensorFlow on looking at what these people are typing, what the partners are typing, and suggesting standards to the teachers that are probably applied to that. I mean, it doesn't work that great, but the fact that like the kids are part of that step zero process of fixing that problem, like, man, that's like, it's addicting, you know?
Yeah.
If it's all right to pick up on that for a moment, this is why I think it's a data challenge, right? For at least 3 decades in urban, in kind of high school land, we've been talking about student-centered or portfolio. Portfolios are ways to kind of reimagine and make learning deeper, right? The challenge is it always collapses under its own weight in the public education sector. Like, in fringe cases, in private schools that have a 6 student to 1 educator context, you can do it, but you can't do it sustainably in the public sector. And a big piece of the story about what technology opens up is that you can have more imaginative and compelling visions for teaching and learning because the structure of data, right, whether it's an oral presentation in defense and you have a video of it, or a kind of rich video edited by students, or some code, or a rubric, right, or a 27 out of 30, that all of those structures that are evidence of learning can kind of sit together in a way that if it's just construction paper and some stuff glued onto it, and there's no other kind of trace of what the effort that students put in is, then over time, kind of more student-centered visions of learning collapse. And that's, I think, where technology is the key enabler.
Yeah. Duane,
So just to add on to that, because I think Shawn brought up a really great point around purposely building on-ramps for the community to be involved in your school. And a lot of schools, they don't actively build those on-ramps so a professional can easily engage with your students. So Stacy, maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the on-ramps that we have, like our electives, the speaker series, along with the internship in the 3rd year that really hits on that.
Yeah, sure. So another another hypothesis that we had was that we have to give kids a lot more exposure to the real world and experience in the real world and engaging with professionals if we expect them to be able to self-generate what they want to do when they grow up, when all they've seen are a couple different careers in their small sphere, whatever our parents were, whatever our teachers are, which is teachers. So we also that a lot of students that we serve traditionally don't get to participate in really enriching extracurricular activities because they have to pick up a sibling or they have to work. So we made the school day longer, and then we made extracurriculars basically mandatory, called them electives, and then we have them taught by partners from the community. So we have DJs come in and teach DJing elective. We have a photographer come in and teach a photography elective. We have a woman who's founding a middle school in DC, Michelle Ashton, who some of you may know, comes in once a week and meets with a group of our students who are now her founders. As long as they finish the elective with her, they're her co-founders of this new middle school with her. So bringing in all these partners adds so much for kids. It adds a big network of social capital. They're all going to have recommendation letters for college. And then in the third year, we're making an internship mandatory so that all kids have that on their resume and have that experience on their resume, just like anybody coming out of a private school has an internship on their resume. And then a whole other area I think we should mention is that in order to have these places where you can do all this self-directed and personalized learning and study tech, you do have to build a really difficult to build school culture that supports all this stuff. And that doesn't just appear, brick by brick with blood, sweat, and tears. You have to spend lots of time developing a school culture and community that supports a place where kids can learn in a self-paced way, which means they're sometimes going to be checked out, and how are you going to deal with that? And then when you are dealing with high trauma populations, you also have to build in supports for that. So we have a really robust restorative discipline program that takes a lot of staff time and work and support. So those things don't just magically happen if we create these incredible experiences. We also have to build all of that infrastructure in, which is really challenging as well.
Well, and what I love about what you guys can hear from each one of these panelists is how technology is built into their entire vision of what learning should be and what student culture should be, student agency, having a porous partnership. These were very key design principles that we asked all the applicants to write towards. Eric, do you want to share a little bit how you also offer the enrichment activities with key partners in Brooklyn for your students to be able to have multiple experiences?
Yeah, and also want to pick up a bit on the thread from Duane and Stacy that that a piece of it is that one of the places that the world's moving very quickly, and high schools, like urban public high schools, are not moving as quickly, is equipping young people to make the case upon graduation for admission into the college of their dreams, right? So if you think of how LinkedIn, with projects and kind of this durable record of who you've worked with over time, what you've accomplished, and what's the kind of evidence base for what you're, for somebody hiring you or asking you to join a particular team. It's also the structure that the XQ kind of teaming site took on, that there's people who have different competencies and skills. And at Brooklyn Lab, we believe that there are charging stations that power learning across any community in America. And we're blessed to be in Brooklyn, where there's world-class cultural institutions and museums and universities and youth-serving nonprofits. But Grand Rapids has world-class cultural institutions, and Los Angeles has kind of world-class opportunities for young people to be engaged in kind of outside of school time learning. What I think matters from a tech perspective is how you kind of over time track evidence of what learning experiences young people have had, and how that particular kind of 2 semesters that you spent in a third-party maker space, or that you spent on an internship or an externship or at a summer camp that was focused on learning the violin, like all of those pieces are ultimately linked to the case that our scholars need to be able to make for kind of access to future opportunities to learn. And Cortex, in giving us the ability to track kind of what novel you're reading in a particular small group and what your essay is about, ultimately allows students to accumulate over time a body of work that helps them make the case for what their future should be.
Great.
Can I jump on that?
Yeah, please. No, please do.
So we work at, Iowa Big doesn't have a building. We're in a co-working space in the sort of arts and culture district in Cedar Rapids, which you probably saw got flooded out in 2008. That's kind of our big recent claim to fame. And then it happened again, 100-year floods every 7 years. So
It's the new normal.
That's right.
Welcome, yeah. So we literally walked every computer up a billion flights of stairs. So what I wanted to say was we work in a co-working space. So I'm around a lot of creatives, a lot of tech, a lot of real estate agents, a lot of lawyers, and really the thing is like, well, what's your GitHub account? And that is just passed around like water. And when I was like, our kids don't have GitHub accounts, that's a problem. And the teacher responded to me and said, well, they're not all coders. Like we're across all the core curriculum areas. And I said, yeah, but like, if we're not putting together that portfolio that other people can recognize, that is standardized in a way that it transcends the common app. It transcends the resume. I mean, it's just something people are, like, legitimizes them. I mean, there's rules for board games on GitHub that people have created and collaborate on. Like, it's not all just code and nerdery. Although, wait, yeah, it is. So
Not all code.
not all code, not all code. And so I just want to point out, like, there are these existing platforms for students to get themselves out there and to get real feedback. I mean, when they write bad code and some stranger in Nepal says this is bad code, I don't have to say that, and that person's language is much more important than mine.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's great. Opening them up to the authentic experts to give the credibility to the feedback. I'm gonna just ask one question, if you guys can indulge me, because I think most everyone else has this question usually. I've been in the other sessions and have heard this, so I'm channeling what I've heard and then open it up to you guys. But how do you develop the capacity of your teachers to maybe even just think this way about technology, like GitHub, you know, or that teacher or the students can actually go in to a platform or have feature requests? So, and then how do you develop the skills and dispositions of your teachers to be able to use technology in a way to scaffold learning or for coding? So, you know, each of you just take a time to share about what you've worked on most in developing the capacity of your teachers, whether that's mindset, skills, dispositions, anything that you want to.
I can start. Shout out to our principal who's in here, Joey Webb, who is a rock star at talent recruitment. But one of the things that he does before hiring someone is go through a list that keeps growing, which is probably like 20 items at this point. And it's an expectations mapping conversation. And on that expectations map is things are going to change constantly. We pivot all the time. This is really messy work. It's going to be hard. And he says, like, we bring them up. And there's all these listed things. And so it's really important to get people on board that have the mindset of innovation, the mindset of rethinking high school, the mindset that they want to try to do things that break the mold. And then this becomes the same mindset that we want our kids to have. So we end up co-innovating with kids and building the same mindset in them. If you ask them, they'll say they're founders of the school, all 108 of them. And so I think the mindset piece is really, really important for staff.
Right? Eric or Shawn?
I want to high five everyone right now. Can we do that later? I don't know if that's appropriate for like a fancy panel. Sorry.
Sure.
We started off in a weird way. We put a bunch of adults back to school. It was called the Billy Madison Project, although we're not licensed to use that language, so sorry. We actually got a letter, so I shouldn't have said that. It's called the Back to School Project, actually. And we put a bunch of people back to school, and they were just whoever would do it. We literally hung a shingle out and said, hey, we're going to put people back into school. You're going to sign a form to make it legit. That you're not going to share data about kids, and we're going to put you in a high school in Iowa, and you're going to spend 2 days there shadowing a kiddo. And you're going to have to ask to go to the bathroom. You're going to take tests. You're going to turn in homework. You're going to do what kids do all day. And to a person, whether they were a Republican, a Democrat, whether they were a CEO, whoever they were, they came back and said, man, and all the things you know, the bells, they can't think, the tests, I took an Algebra 2 test today and got an F. I run a data company. Like these kinds of not me, this person, right? And so for me, like the genesis of this was like them telling me, like, look, I remember high school, we all remember it, it's a shared experience, so it's comfortable. But oh no, and especially a city that was flooded out and destroyed. Let's just not rebuild something that's 100 years old because we like the architecture. Like the architecture can still be fancy and we can still do something really wild on the inside. So the idea of like how do you build a staff that's into that, we trot out that data from that project every time we do a hire. And thanks to XQ, we can actually hire. And we asked them, like, are you okay with this? Are you okay with the fact that the community is asking for a place that doesn't bully kids with grades, a place where the kids actually can jump from a project and fail it, and we'd actually care more about their reflection on that as a high schooler than we do about like them winning the project. And the staff, you start off, you hear a lot of stuff from staff, like all the things that teachers normally say when you ask them what they want in a successful kid, but it always ends with, I hope that the experience in my classroom is, I hope that they learn tech. I'll show them Google. I'll show them these things. And whenever it's that like teacher focused, I hope, I wish, shenanigans. Like it just doesn't work. No, like we're going to design for that. Like there is going to be no plan. And when the kids show up on day one, which is August 17th. They're going to show up, and we're going to say there's no plan. Here's the projects, and here's the partners. If you like the project, find a team and call them. Set up a meeting. That's literally our day one, and then I'm the teacher for that project because I think I like it too. And let's see where it goes. Like that, for most teachers, that is something they don't want to do. And so, creating that culture, I think, is something that when you have that community data, it's hard to pretend that it's wrong or that somehow the 100-year-old model is good just because of memory.
Right.
I think a part of why, as a sector, we have a hard time attracting educators to technology is that most of the technology that we're kind of pushing in K-12 education is janky, right? It's not elegant. It's not beautifully designed. It doesn't kind of start first by asking what's the challenge of practice that educators have? What's the thing that they're not able to accomplish right now? And how could technology serve, inform, and enhance that process in a way that is meaningful, i.e. it actually kind of gives educators their Sundays back. And so if we think about kind of pushing technology in terms of how do I turn teachers into human APIs, and they kind of can spend their Sundays downloading a CSV file from one piece of math courseware and kind of loading it into a pivot table and then trying to upload it someplace else. The kind of appeal for that, we're going to do a lot of used car salesman activity, and we'll get pretty limited uptake ultimately. And I ultimately think that it needs to be better than the option of not using the technology. And I think that there's probably two fundamental places where that's the case. One is, as we try to kind of differentiate or personalize for young people, we need to be able to kind of recuperate in particular ways. And if you frame the advantages of technology and interoperability in terms of you have a student who spends an hour in Read 180, and then an hour in speech and language pathology, an hour in your writing class, an hour over in a literature class, and none of those educators have the time to talk to each other. Your student's generating growth over here, no growth and no motivation over here, is rock star engaged here, and totally disconnected over here. You don't have any time to compare notes and ask when it's working, why is it working. You don't have any time to kind of identify and cut out practices that just don't make a bit of difference for that particular student, right? So on the kind of recuperation end, there's a use case around technology and interoperability that I think educators get and can buy into. And on the high end, all of this kind of project stuff and emergent stuff and kind of work with community partners, et cetera, is never going to be comfortable outside of the fringe case, right? It's never going to be the thing that the 4,000 person comprehensive high school is doing consistently until technology allows us to have a record of it that when either your principal or some outside community member says, I don't know what you're doing in there, why don't you go back to the Carnegie unit? You're able to say, we are confident in what this more project-based and kind of performance-based world looks like, and here's the evidence that we do have that it's making a difference.
Yeah.
And
No,
I'll
I
say-
love, yes.
I was going to
Dwayne.
say, in addition to mindset, I think one of the other key things is providing support to teachers, and it comes in two forms. One is, if you work in technology, you're always going to get to a point where you get stuck. So they need a place to go ask questions. Now they can go to Stack Overflow, they can go to GitHub also, but it's nice to be able to find people that they can go to and ask questions, whereas the computer science teacher one time got stuck trying to really teach cryptography. Well, my brother works in cybersecurity. So they worked together to build out a lesson and a module that really supported the learning outcomes that they wanted, but it was based and rooted in real world application in a sense. But in addition to that, as you're choosing your ed tech vendors or companies, find ones that offer great support also. So that when you have questions that come up and they get stuck using technology, they will be able to help your teachers get unstuck quicker. Because oftentimes that's one of the more frustrating parts of integrating technology into schools.
And build your own help desk. So there's organizations like Mouse that train students to be the in-house help desk, and whether a teacher's having trouble getting on a network or people aren't clear how a particular bit of courseware works, build that skill in your student population.
Stacey, I think, have you guys developed your students to do that, right?
Well, yeah, our kids organically started creating a hardware elective too. So in addition to coding, we now have a hardware elective where they are repairing the Chromebooks for our school. So we also just cut out all the costs of Chromebook repair because our kids just order the part for $20 online and then fix it themselves.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, the diversity of answers around the teacher question that everyone always asks, how do you develop teachers to do this, shows you that it's not just one single answer, that it's very comprehensive and very diverse, and you have to approach it in multiple ways. So we have about 15 minutes left for you guys to ask questions of any of the schools or of XQ. So go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question relating to.
It just one. I have to have you use the microphone because the session's being recorded. My apologies. Sorry.
I had a question relating to soft skill development. It's called transactional fluency in the workplace, something of focus. How do you actively seek to teach that to your students, or is it a byproduct to your process? You know, like learning how to work with a 45-year-old, 50-year-old white guy on a project, right? For 17-year-old kids. Issues like that and issues of conflict, how you deal with that, all that kind of soft skill stuff. I'd love to hear how you guys develop those skills in your students.
Well, why don't we start with Shawn, because I saw you looking at him purposefully, and then I'm sure the other schools will probably add to it as well.
So we track the universal constructs, 21st century skills, soft skills, whatever sort of wrapper you want to put on that. We track that every time we have a stand-up meeting with the student team. And so we have a prompt that pushes to every teacher's phone based on their calendar that says, all right, I know our system knows you're with these kids at this time. I need you to track how X student is doing with their prep the week before. How are they handling the professionalism? When the partner pushes them, or when an adult pushes them on an idea that probably isn't gonna fly or doesn't have legs, how did the student respond to that? And that goes into a control chart report that they see way before they ever see their standards or their grades or any of that stuff, right? So that I can sit down with that student if I feel like they're being unsuccessful and say, look, like I've seen you be successful in these universal constructs, and then in October, like there's a knot, like something's going on. Where are you at? What are you not thinking about anymore? Are you not being metacognitive about your time when we give you that time? Where are you at? And usually, the answer is, well, prom or something. But yeah, so we want to put those skills first. And my social studies teacher will scream at me after this if I don't mention that when we sat down as a staff to say, look, what do we care about? And we're going through all these power standards, and we're doing that whole typical shtick that teachers do, like, well, I think that the cite strong and throw textual evidence standard is really important, but no, wait, the linear model standard, that's the one that'll really fix our school. And my social studies teacher was like, no. The only thing we ever talk about these kids is their joy, how efficacious they are, how they use their time, how they are choosing a space, and if they're choosing the right projects for their passion that pushes them. And so we've called this J-stack, right? Like joy, time, assessment, curriculum, and space. And we actually assess those things first. So when we go into a student's profile to give them grades, or however you want to call it, the first thing we're confronted with is, where's their joy at? Like, are they finding the growth in a bad project? Are they finding the growth in a good project? And until we put those marks in, until we put an assessment in, I'm not even allowed to click anything about a math standard or English standard. So we put those things first, and of course, the answer is, as soon as you actually can work on a kid on one of those specific elements of the universal constructs, suddenly English class becomes almost a joke. Like, they just do it. It just becomes a part of what they need to do, and then if you need to spackle some literature standards because that doesn't show up in a electrical distribution project so much, then that spackling can happen and the kid respects that. So I hope that's kind of a long-winded way to say that. Sorry if that's nonsense, but.
So the easy answer, yes, purposeful, and multiple opportunities. And both all the schools in XQ have broader learning goals. Matt referred to the XQ learner goals that we talk about, which is collaboration, which is fundamental literacies and content knowledge. But we do believe it is social emotional learning. It is academic content. It is 21st century skills. Whatever label you want to add, deeper learning, XQ learner, anything. We believe that it is for the whole child. Eric and Stacy, do you guys want to talk about this quickly, and then we can take another question?
The quick version is, I think one of the pitfalls here is saying we think growth mindset matters, and therefore we're going to talk students through a PowerPoint on growth the mindset and have them take a quiz on growth mindset, and then be confused when that doesn't transform how they're approaching themselves as learners. a piece of how we try to tackle that in Cortex, which is used at Brooklyn Lab, but is also this fall will be kind of 20,000 users around the country. So has is used in a whole range of contexts. Is by being able to tag any project or any assessment with multiple standards, because it makes more sense to have conversations around how are you doing, within collaboration, how are you listening, or within kind of project management, how are you kind of motivating other folks on your team in a world where you're able to kind of have the assessment of those things be embedded in a learning experience that's already kind of meaningful and that the students engaged at. So trying to kind of acknowledge that too often there's a curious separation from discussions of how do we operationalize habits of success or wayfinding ability or creative know-how versus how are we operationalizing the core academic program and looking at kind of fundamental literacies and the kind of core academic skills as happening at the same time in the same contexts that the rest of the stuff is happening.
We built a full course on this that we call Leadership, and all students take it. And the first quarter of this course was called Self-Science. So kids took the Myers-Briggs and a couple other assessments to start learning about themselves and be able to build a foundation for their own identity and where they want to go in the future. And then they also learn executive skills like writing a professional email, which we don't really want them to learn by accident because that's bad for everybody. They built a LinkedIn profile, so now they all have one of those, things like that. And then we've also been learning recently from a school in Tennessee called Valor, where they're experimenting a lot with social emotional learning through circles, which are much more where people literally sit in a circle, but you develop all these coping skills and conflict resolution skills and communication skills. So we're incorporating some of the lessons learned from them. And then there is a way that technology is helpful here too. I don't know that it's completely ready to go, but there's a couple tools that are experimenting with elementary kids where they can have virtual reality experiences where they're interacting with someone, so they can experience what it would be like for someone else to have disrupted the class the way they did or something, so that they could see how that feels for them when someone else did what they just did in the class. So we haven't found a tool yet for high school that does that, but as soon as it's available, we will be testing it. And then finally, the way that we measure schools really matters here, and I think XQ is trying to move the needle on this area as well. As soon as we start measuring kids' acquisition of these skills, then schools are going to start doing more to actually make sure that they are implementing them. We have to be careful about how we measure it, of course, because that's complicated, but historically, we've only measured things like their academic progress, and as soon as we measure more of what we actually want kids to know and where we want them to be, then the activities and programming in schools will follow.
All right, I appreciate that. Another question? See, there's one on the side and then in the back, and if you guys could just use the microphone. And we have about 7 minutes left, and they really are going to kick us out right at 7 minutes, so I will help our answers maybe be short so we can get to both questions.
My question is, what are the characteristics of the children that you see do best in your settings, or conversely, like that don't excel? And or another question, if it's more relevant to you, is what are some resources, particularly private sector resources, that could really accelerate what you're doing that you'd like access to?
Do you want to take the first question on private sector resources? Would that help you? Or?
Yeah, so I'll talk about the kids. Is that
Okay, go for it.
So we,
Who?
the kiddos. So we have a really hard time identifying students that would be a good fit for our program. We're a first come, first served. We cross-cut across 4 school districts in Iowa, totaling like 27,000 students. So there's a huge pool that we draw our tiny, tiny experience from. Really the only measurement we found for a student that succeeds here is their willingness to like open their calendar app on their phone. Right? Like there's some kids who won't do that. But we thought, maybe gifted kids are going to excel here just like they do everywhere else. And I mean, the data shows no significant difference between a student who has a 2.7. It mostly has everything to do with, do they really believe us when we say we want to know what they want to do and we want to find a professional who does that? Private sector, I'll be honest with you, like we need your project ideas, right? Like you've got stuff that is just below your resource line that high schoolers want on their resume. And do not be afraid to take community school districts serious.
That's great. I think I want to make sure we get to the next question, but as Eric kind of led off the panel, and as did Stacy, is that the purpose of both Brooklyn Lab and Washington Leadership is to serve the students most at need of a great public education and students who have not been served. So both schools have pretty much 100% low-income students, high number of students who have been designated as special education, and so they have purposely structured and created schools to serve students who are of need. I don't know if you guys want to add to it, because it is both Stacy and Eric's passion, as well as many of our super schools who serve predominantly low-income schools and students who are multiple grade levels behind. So it's a much longer question. I want to get to the other one, but I don't want to speak for your passion.
The one thing I would request from the private sector is don't build walled gardens, right? I don't think that we know what the best kind of way to teach high school science is, in a digitally informed way 5 years from now is yet. Like, I don't think that the market has settled out about how technology will transform writing instruction or give us a durable record of who young people are as mathematicians. And so entrepreneurs in the private sector tend to think in terms of feature, and then to build a walled garden around their feature. And the only way that schools are going to continually iterate and improve as a result of these walled gardens, or said another way, the only way schools are going to genuinely adopt your products as the private sector is if you build systems that have data in and data out in a transparent and clear kind of way that respects data privacy, because otherwise we're just none of the tools are ever going to be kind of develop a critical mass of schools that use them that will allow them to develop over time. And otherwise, schools are going to be kind of left with tech solutions of 3 to 5 years from now, because unless we're able to plug into and speak to the private sector solutions, we're not going to be really able to use them to power learning in our schools.
So do you guys mind if I just do that one last question, since we have 3 minutes? So the one last question, so we at least can get it on the record and maybe get one person to address it, and then I know that they have someone come in right after us. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Great work. Whichever answer is shorter. I'm curious for, in terms of XQ, how to scale this amazing work going forward, or maybe a tighter question. Is there a connective tissue? Do you guys work together or connect between the schools?
Do the 10 schools work together? They're probably very tired of each other. Yes, we try to partner the schools together as much as possible because they have so much to learn. And so I really love your last question, because it's really kind of a good question to end on. We have amazing schools. We have Rise that's here that is really serving, want to serve students who come from the foster care system, who are homeless, and who have not been served traditionally well by a school based on time and school day. We have a school here that's going to, be in a museum, and they're going to be focusing on place-based learning. Sunny wasn't able to come because she's in testimony in Louisiana to have her school approved as a charter, because they want to learn through climate change and by being on the Mississippi River, and sometimes having their students learn through scientists and being placed on a barge. We have traditional high schools here who want to disrupt what a large comprehensive high school looks like by personalizing teaching and learning, by having it place-based. And so our students, our schools can learn from each other. We want them to learn from each other, but we want them just to be the tipping point of a movement to help catalyze everybody else who participated in the competition and everybody else who is watching them, and for folks to cheer for their success and for people to support them, and for XQ to constantly push out the stories to partners like you and everyone else who is working hard on innovation in our schools. And we want everyone to learn from each other, but including the 10. And we do bring them together. We are going to create more of an online community, learning a lot from Next Gen, how they've done that with their schools. But we believe the power is in numbers, and 10 is small and mighty, and we will be growing. But the real numbers is everything that Matt talked about in terms of the movement making, and that's where we depend on you. So I want to take that opportunity to thank you dearly for coming, for sticking with us for 90 minutes, and to certainly invite you to speak with the 3 schools up here today, but to speak with the 7 schools in the audience, and that will be here throughout the rest of the conference. Some of them are doing their 7-minute pitches tomorrow during the different sessions, so follow us on Twitter and on our website, and we hope to really push the movement out to everybody else so the rest of the United States and the world beyond can really rethink high school. Thank you so much.